My name is Mark, and this story goes all the way back to the early 1990s, when I was just a teenager and the world was a very different place. Back then, being a PC gamer wasn't trendy. It made you part of a tiny, nerdy underground. There was no internet to download games, no Steam, no digital libraries. The only way we could get our hands on new titles was by ordering them from abroad via airmail, which, by the way, was expensive. I had a close friend, Alex, and together we'd save money, buy games, and then trade them with each other. We'd also copy the copy protection when possible, things like code wheels or password sheets, so that the games remained playable even after sharing. It was our way of making gaming semi-affordable and exciting. Then one day, everything changed. When a new kid joined our class, let's call him Dennis. At first, Dennis seemed interesting. He bragged that his uncle had a huge library of games, dozens that we hadn't even heard of. He had X-Wing, Alone in the Dark, Warcraft stuff we only dreamed of owning. So naturally, we offered to trade. We trusted him. We even lent him original copies of our most prized games like The Settlers, Doom 2, and Monkey Island. In return, he gave us ... trash, I mean it. Corrupted floppy disks, missing copy protection, games that wouldn't even load. At first we thought it was just bad luck, but after a few more exchanges, we realized Dennis was intentionally scamming us. He'd copy our working games for himself and return broken discs or excuses. And the worst part, he thought it was funny to make matters worse. Dennis constantly mocked me for liking Queen. I was, and still am, a huge Freddie Mercury fan. But Dennis would joke about it, saying stuff like like that gay guy with a sneer, coming from a very conservative family. His comments always carried a mean-spirited tone. His mother was deeply Catholic, and his father was a strict, old-school kind of man, the kind who believed boys shouldn't cry, and that anything outside the norm was sinful. That's when me and Alex came up with a plan, not just to prank Dennis, but to teach him a lesson he'd never forget. Our opportunity came during a school event, where our class was taken to an AIDS awareness seminar organized by a health foundation. At the end of the event, they handed out flyers, educational pamphlets, and awkwardly free condoms with the organization's logo. Most of the students threw them away or made jokes, but Alex and we took several each, not because we needed them, but because we had a revenge plan brewing. You see, Alex had a printer at home, which was rare in those days. Together, we designed a fake letter using the AIDS Foundation's logo. We made it look official. The letter was addressed to Dennis by his first name and said things like, "We're proud of you for reaching out. Being open about your sexuality isn't easy at your age. Enclosed are some helpful resources and condoms to ensure you stay safe." We printed the letter, carefully folded it, and added all the flyers and condoms we'd collected from the seminar. Then we mailed it, not to Dennis, but to Mr. and Mrs. Dennis's last name, his parents. That way, his father would be the one to open it. We thought it was just a clever prank, a way to embarrass him like he had embarrassed and used us. But what happened next? We couldn't have imagined it in our wildest dreams. The prank had been planned for weeks, but neither Alex nor I could have predicted just how far the ripples would travel once we finally mailed that envelope. We thought it would just embarrass Dennis a bit. We thought maybe he'd get teased by his friends or grounded for a day or two. But what happened next shocked even us. Dennis didn't show up to school the next day. That wasn't too unusual on its own. Kids got sick, skipped, or stayed home all the time. But when 2 days passed, and he still hadn't returned, curiosity turned into concern, or maybe guilt, depending on who you asked. Then whispers started floating around. Stories, rumors, snippets of gossip passed between classmates like wildfire. One girl in our class, Angela, said her mum was friends with Dennis's mum through the church choir. According to her, Dennis's mother had broken down crying when she opened the envelope. Apparently, she'd screamed so loudly that neighbors came to the door. His father, a stern man known for his rigid religious views, had apparently hit the ceiling, furious, ashamed, and absolutely convinced that his son had been hiding a sinful secret. That's the phrase people kept repeating. Sinful secret. It hit us like a bucket of cold water. We had just wanted to prank the guy to hit back after months of being ripped off, mocked, and treated like human vending machines for free. PC games. Dennis had taken our trust, crushed it, and laughed in our faces. He gave us broken games, tampered floppies, and excuses wrapped in smug grins. We wanted revenge, sure, but what we'd set off was something darker, deeper by the end of the week. Dennis still hadn't returned. Our prank had become something bigger, a moral crisis inside his deeply conservative household. One of our classmates, a quiet kid named Tomas, who lived a few houses down from Dennis, told us he'd heard shouting late at night. He said Dennis's father had taken a belt to him, something we didn't want to believe, but it stuck with us. It wasn't just that Dennis had been grounded. He was being punished for something he never even did, for a lie we made up. Alex and I were starting to feel uneasy. We never talked about calling it off or coming clean. Not exactly, but the laughs we'd shared after the prank turned into quiet stares. Nervous chuckles, guilt, although unspoken, hung in the air between us like fog. Then Monday came, and Dennis returned. He walked into class with his head down, backpack slung low, avoiding everyone's gaze. You could see it on his face, the shame, the confusion, the weight of days spent under parental interrogation. His eyes were bloodshot, like he hadn't slept. There were no usual smart comments, no smirks, none of his usual swagger. He just sat down, pulled out his notebook, and started doodling like the world didn't exist. But even in that silence, you could feel it. He was suspicious. He wasn't dumb. He'd pieced together the timeline. He'd connected the event, the flyers, the fact that only a few people had access to printers back then. It was the 90s. Owning an inkjet printer made you a tech wizard in a sea of peasants. Dennis wasn't tech-savvy, but he knew Alex and I were. He knew we had both the means and the motive. And sure enough, by Wednesday, he approached us. It wasn't a confrontation. He didn't yell. He just sat next to us during break and started talking about the AIDS Foundation event, trying to fish for details. Man, that event was so weird, right? Kinda creepy how they had all those condoms out, huh? Alex stiffened. I stayed quiet, my heart pounding. I could feel him watching us, waiting for a reaction. He casually dropped, I heard someone in class got a letter from them. That's so nuts. It wasn't confirmation, but it was a test, a psychological pressure play, and we failed. Alex snorted. Just a little laugh, just a smirk, probably out of nerves. But it was all Dennis needed. His eyes narrowed, and he just nodded. I knew it, he said, standing up. I knew it. The next day, we were summoned to the principal's office. Not just the two of us, Dennis was there too. So were his parents. And trust me, they were not there to chat. The atmosphere in that office was suffocating. Dennis's father had that look, the kind where you don't know if he's going to explode or start crying. His mother wouldn't look at us. The principal was stone-faced, flipping through a manila folder that clearly held the evidence. Our fake letter, the flyers, even the condoms from the foundation, still in their branded packaging. We were screwed. "What were you thinking?" the principal asked, voiced low and dangerous. "This isn't just a prank. This is harassment. You impersonated a real foundation. You targeted a student in a personal, humiliating way." We couldn't look at Dennis. I couldn't even look at Alex. It was a long meeting. There were threats of suspension. One of our parents was called to the school. There was talk of involving outside authorities, though in the end that didn't happen. But we had to write formal apology letters. We had to attend mandatory counseling sessions for ethical decision-making. Our permanent records almost had misconduct notations, which would have followed us through high school. For a few weeks, we were outcasts. Teachers watched us with suspicion. Classmates avoided us. Even some of our friends turned cold. Not because they cared about Dennis honestly, he hadn't been well liked, but because what we did crossed a line. We went after someone's identity, even if we didn't mean to out him, even if it was all a hoax. We exposed a vulnerability that was deeply personal, and that stuck. Yet deep down, I couldn't help but feel this odd mix of guilt and satisfaction. I hated that we went that far. I hated that it escalated into a full-on family crisis. But at the same time, we finally had justice. Dennis never messed with us again. No more broken games. No more mocking Queen. No more treating us like expendable nerds. We had pulled off a prank, so savage it echoed through our school for weeks, maybe even months. But the price we paid, that was only starting to reveal itself. Weeks passed, and slowly, things at school returned to normal, at least on the surface. People stopped whispering when we entered the room. Teachers stopped glancing at us like we were holding a grenade. Our classmates stopped acting like we had a contagious disease. But something had changed. Permanently. The prank, the revenge, whatever Yao wanted to call it, it stuck with us. Even though the principal didn't officially suspend us, and no police report was ever filed, there was a kind of invisible mark on our reputations. We weren't just the PC guys anymore. We were those kids who sent a fake AIDS letter. It didn't help that the 90s were still deep in the shadow of the AIDS crisis. People were afraid, misinformed, and often deeply prejudiced. So the idea that someone might be gay, even falsely accused, was treated like nuclear gossip. And we had touched that nerve with surgical precision. Dennis returned to school, but he was different, quiet, withdrawn. He didn't talk much, and when he did, it was short, guarded sentences. He no longer tried to act cool or brag about his uncle's game collection. In fact, he never brought up games again. He sat alone at lunch, worked alone during group assignments. It was like the whole thing had drained the life out of him. There were moments, small ones, when I saw his pain. A glance across the classroom, a quick look in his eyes before he turned away. And it hit me in those moments. We broke something. In him, not physically, not in a way the school could measure, but something deeper. Alex tried to move on fast. He made jokes about the prank even months later, tried to tell it like a war story. Remember the look on his mom's face. I bet she's still crying. He'd laugh, but I could see something behind his laugh, a kind of nervous twitch, like he needed to keep laughing to pretend we hadn't crossed a line. One day after class, Alex and I were walking home when we passed Dennis at the bike racks. He was unlocking his bike when Alex tossed out a casual, "Hey, Dennis, you get any more letters lately?" Dennis didn't respond. He looked at us, quiet. His eyes were dull, hollow, and he said just one sentence: "You guys ruined my life." That stopped Alex in his tracks. "Me too." Dennis got on his bike and rode away, and we stood there in silence. It was the first time he'd said anything directly to us since the principal's office. It wasn't said with anger. That was the strange part. It was just truth, like someone pointing out that the sky is blue, factual, heavy. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying what he said. "You ruined my life." It echoed in my head, bouncing around like a ricochet that refused to settle. And it got me thinking, what had we really done? Yes, Dennis scammed us. He used us for games, disrespected our love for Queen, mocked what made us happy. But we'd turned that frustration into something massive, into something irreversible. We had attacked the core of his identity, his family, his reputation, his future even. Whether he was gay or not didn't matter. What mattered was that we made his parents believe it, and in their world, that wasn't something they could handle. His father, from everything we'd heard, never looked at him the same way again. The Catholic guilt, the shame, the suspicion that never went away, no matter how many denials he gave. And knowing Dennis, I don't think he ever really got a second chance at home. The guilt started growing like ivy in my chest, quiet, creeping, but impossible to pull out. Around the end of the semester, Dennis stopped coming to school again. This time, it wasn't just a few days. He was gone for 2 whole weeks. When he came back, he looked thinner, paler, and more shut off than ever before. Angela told us she overheard teachers talking. Apparently, Dennis had tried to run away from home. They found him 2 towns over, staying with a distant cousin. His parents had pulled him back. But things bad. His father had reportedly asked the school about transferring him elsewhere, maybe a private school, or even a military academy. That hit me hard. This wasn't funny anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. We had wanted payback. Instead, we had reshaped someone's entire teenage life through shame, fear, and stigma. One afternoon, I was alone in the library, pretending to study for an exam. Alex hadn't come to school that day, and I saw Dennis across the room, sitting near the window, reading a book. For the first time, I decided to walk over. He looked up at me, said nothing, just stared. "I'm sorry," I said. I meant it. He didn't speak. I didn't think it would go that far. Still, silence. "I just wanted you to stop screwing us over. That's it. I didn't mean for your parents to. You don't get to explain it away." He cut me off, quiet voice, firm tone. "You wanted to hurt me, and you did." I stood there, swallowing the words I thought might help, but they sounded stupid in my head, and I knew he was right. There was nothing I could say that would fix what we did. I nodded, turned, and walked away. From that day on, I kept my distance. Not out of fear, out of respect. We never became friends again. Dennis never forgave us, and I didn't expect him to, but something changed inside me after that conversation. I started seeing the weight of actions, not just the intent, but the consequences. Words aren't just words. Pranks aren't just pranks. Revenge isn't clean. It's been over 30 years since we sent that letter. 3 full decades. Sometimes I forget it even happened. Life moved on. We finished school, got jobs, grew older. But once in a while, usually late at night, or when I see something about the AIDS epidemic, or hear a Queen song on the radio, the memory hits me like a punch to the gut. Back then, I thought we were just getting even. Now, I know we were using cruelty as currency. I went off to college, got a degree in computer science, and eventually moved into software development. The irony of it all. I now work with cybersecurity teams that deal with fraud, deception, and social engineering. And sometimes I think back to that letter and realize I was doing social engineering at 16, without even knowing what it was. Called Alex. He drifted out of my life after high school. We kept in touch for a few years, old friends, old jokes, but something between us fractured after that prank. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe he didn't want to be reminded. Or maybe I didn't. Either way, the connection faded. The last I heard, he moved to Berlin and now runs some retro gaming store. Fitting, considering how much we loved those floppy disks and pixelated graphics back in the day. And Dennis. For a long time, I didn't know what happened to him. After graduation, he disappeared. Didn't attend the farewell event. Didn't sign our yearbooks. Didn't show up in any alumni groups. It was like he had vanished off the face of the earth. I assumed he moved away, maybe to another country, started over, until one day, about 10 years ago, I saw him again. It was in London. I was there on a work trip, attending a tech conference. I stopped by a quiet indie bookstore on a rainy afternoon, just to browse. And there he was behind the counter, wearing glasses, hair graying at the temples, organizing a stack of books. It took me a second to realize it was him. But as soon as our eyes met, I knew. Dennis. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. I walked over, cautiously. Dennis, I asked. He paused, gave me a tight nod. Yeah, I'm sorry, I said. Again, after all these years. Those were the only words that felt right. He looked at me for a long moment, then finally said, "You already said that once." He remembered. Of course he did. We spoke for a few minutes. Nothing deep. Surface level. I told him I was in tech. He said the bookstore belonged to his husband. They ran it together. His husband, he had come out, fully, openly. Despite everything, I asked if he was happy. He nodded. Yeah, now I am. Then he looked me in the eye. But for years, I wasn't. And what you did, that letter, that stayed with me for a long time. I nodded. I know, I was stupid, cruel. He didn't argue. I thought it was revenge, I said. But it wasn't. It was just pain. Redirected. He said nothing. Just turned back to his books. I didn't stay long. I thanked him for speaking to me, and as I left, he called out quietly, "Don't do that again." I turned around. What, don't? Go looking for closure from people you hurt just so you can sleep better, he said. Some wounds don't heal because someone apologized. They heal when we stop bleeding. And that was it. That moment, those words hit harder than any punishment our school could have given us.